Welcome to the Autonomic Homeostasis Activation Podcast. I'm Tom Powles.
And I'm Ruth Lawrenson. We'll be unpacking what it looks like to activate your brain to holistically manage stress and trauma to facilitate homeostasis.
Being free to experience wellness in body, mind, and spirit.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
Welcome, listeners, to our timely conversation. A little dad humor. So, we are in the series about fundamentals of wellness, and Ruth and I are going to have some conversation about wellness because there are always situations that will challenge that. But that doesn't mean it's not about wellness. It just means that wellness is being challenged, and we're going to have a timely conversation about that. So it's time for our wellness.
Well, Tom, I think you've definitely made your point there about time. So if you haven't clocked in, there you go. If you haven't clocked in yet, that we are going to be talking about some aspects of timing in wellness, then you've completely missed the point, So we're here. And actually one of the things, Tom, that is going to lead into this conversation about some aspects of time and how time impacts our well-being, our wellness, is this idea of, let's go back to homeostasis, because we've talked about it the last couple of episodes now. I think we've also talked about interoception as well, but homeostasis, we've talked about it in just to really try and describe what it is, because there's so much misunderstanding about homeostasis, and it is the fundamental part of well-being, right?
Because
even in the
homeostasis is life.
Yes. So part of this conversation is that we're unraveling this a little bit. We're wanting to kind of talk about the whole scope of homeostasis, and in a nutshell. And Tom, I want you to kind of go into this a little bit, because I think you're going to be able to articulate it really well. And in a nutshell, homeostasis it can never just be about us. There's an extension of homeostasis, and it's not a separate thing, it's part of the whole thing that involves our interconnectedness in terms of the way other people are around us, our neighborhoods, our cities, our family life, that there's an extension to homeostasis that involves our connection with others, with places, with the state of our world, even, as wide as you want to get. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yes. No one's an island. No one lives in isolation. We are interconnected. We exist interconnected. It's a trick of the mind, or perhaps with reclusiveness or attempting to avoid an intentional decision to disconnect from others. But the reason that that's an intentional decision is because we don't naturally exist that way. We exist in context with other human beings. We may exist in relationship with them. We may not think that we have any relationship to them until their lives impact our lives. And this is about timing. This is about vicarious. But with our existence, we're part of a greater whole. We've thrown around that term that I've kind of coined, which is me-we. And there is no me without a we, and there is no we without a me. And that's how we exist. And we exist in moments. And life is a series of moments in that state. And we've had some recent experiences, micro level, immediate, or macro level, even national and global, that have been very challenging to that interconnectedness that we all share. So in our prior conversation to recording now the conversation, you had shared a recent, very recent experience that really disturbed your well-being.
Yeah. And just before I go into that, Tom, I want to just reiterate the point that this is so important to wellness and well-being, because you can't, I think the approach to wellness has to be a me-we approach. And I wonder, when you think about, like, if I pull up ideas of wellness, I think of someone going to the gym or doing meditation or making sure they're eating well, or so you can control all of that stuff when it's just you, right? You can like, if the wellness industry is actually targeted to you, then there's a levels, depending on how disciplined you are, that you can kind of climb that wellness ladder in a wellness type of non-superhero type of way. But the point is, what we're talking about is that if we don't acknowledge the interconnectedness, the things outside of what I can control in my wellness, and don't understand that impacts my wellness as much as anything else, and recognize what's happening, then it's gonna lead. We're not going to have the full level of wellness that we can really achieve. So that's the conversation. Like, what is that? Now, you're alluding to a conversation we had just a moment ago, really, about this weekend. I'm in Fort Collins. I live in Fort Collins, Colorado, and this weekend it was on Saturday. I was having a little bit of time in the gym doing my own wellness. And I remember I was like in the gym, I was in the swimming pool, and I was thinking, okay, when I get out, I'm going to I'll swing by Trader Joe's, because I love shopping at Trader Joe's, one of my favorites. And Trader Joe's is right near our Foothills Mall. And I'll swing by Trader Joe's and pick up a few things for dinner. And then, because I was thinking specifically I was thinking, oh, we'll get a few things to do some tacos or something. That'll be easy, right? So I got out of the gym. It was about 4:30, and I drove to the intersection where, left was towards Trader Joe's and the Foothills Mall, and then right was towards home. It's only 5 minutes around the corner at my gym. And as I got to the intersection, a little thought just popped into my mind, and I just thought, you know what, I really haven't got that much energy to go to Trader Joe's. I think that we've probably got enough stuff in the fridge to figure something out. So I changed my mind really last minute and just went home. Now, when I got home, I checked my emails just randomly, and then all of these, I don't know if you've got this on your emails, but locally we have like this neighborhoods it's like a neighborhood newsletter that everyone kind of can talk on, and it's an online thing. And I saw lots pop up, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And one of them was shooter at the mall. And so I clicked on it, and I rarely look at them because I just usually someone's talking about a cat up a tree or something like that. So, but it caught my attention, and I clicked on it, and sure enough, at real time, and this must have been like 4:45. There was like 15 minutes after I just got home. Everyone was saying there's an active shooter at the mall. Trader Joe's is in lockdown. The theatre is in lockdown. The whole mall is in lockdown. Police are everywhere. Everything's going on. And so obviously I was like, wow, I was just on my way there. That's crazy. Now, I don't know what I would have collided with. I don't know whether I would have got into Trader Joe's before lockdown, or whether I would have just bumped into police presence. But because it was right on the edge of that time limit. And then, unfortunately, I was just watching the news unfold, and unfortunately, within the hour, it showed that there were 2 people had been shot down dead on the sidewalk right outside the mall, and they later on arrested a juvenile. I think it's gang related. We still don't actually know the names of the people. But it was really interesting, Tom, because, I just noticed even on Sunday, which is yesterday, just driving around, I just really felt like that vicarious trauma. I didn't have the words for it then. I just felt like this kind of, now I'm not a family member. No one, I'm not directly involved. But this was my Mal. This was the Mal I take my kids to. This is like, we're there all the time. This is where we go to the theatre. And then it's like my city. And it's people that live in my city, probably that they were juveniles, so they went to some school. I don't know yet, we don't know the information, but I remember on Sunday just feeling like, oh, this is so awful, this is so sad, more so than I would read news about another thing. Like, I'm always connected, I think we do have empathy for a lot of things, but when it's on our doorstep, I felt it more, And it was interesting as well, just looking at I was on the Facebook police website for Fort Collins, and just, there must have been like 900 comments there. And you could see the whole community that was like, oh my gosh, this is a sad day. And there was this connection that I think I felt, and I saw among my community, of our well-being as individuals in this community was affected, and is affected now, by this incident. And I think we've seen that from when we've seen other incidents in other cities. You see that the vigils and the mourning that can happen in a city. And I think what it shows really is that this interconnectedness, our well-being, how does the well-being of something that randomly I'm not connected with in any way is happening in my city, but it does impact me. It does impact my well-being. So I think that was the recognition really of, and when we were talking about extended homeostasis, like we need extended homeostasis because we are not isolated units. We are not buffered. There's these things that are happening all around us. And I just described one local one, but like you said earlier, that it could be it is a global thing, I think, for many people right now. And then all family situations or school situations, or, the list goes on and on and on. But that's one example of that happening for me very recently.
And that raises the question of wellness, because again, wellness and illness, and that's a trajectory issue. What is the direction of my well-being? Someone may have a great deal of well-being and they may squander that. They may not promote that. They may exploit it even, and overwork and not taking care of themselves, and their wellness continues to deteriorate in a pathological direction, in the direction of illness. Or we can be pursuing wellness, and that's a trajectory toward health and well-being to the degree that we can experience that. And there may be things that happen to us. We may catch some disease. We may develop some condition. We may experience some event that negatively impacts our well-being, but the trajectory we stay on is toward health and well-being. And there are three related concepts that this experience of yours and mine immediately here, and I happen to be in Washington, D.C. for a few weeks, just family circumstances and supporting my son and daughter-in-law in their lives. And as I like to put it, Camp Pop Pop DC, and I'm taking care of the animals here and working working with video and remote and that sort of thing. But living here, and Washington DC is kind of a thing here. Globally, the epicenter of a whole lot that's happening.
Yeah.
And the three things that we wanted to chat about today, one of which is, and it's this interconnectedness, and it's vicarious stress and trauma. It's not immediately my stress and trauma. You weren't there at the shooting. You weren't shot. You didn't have a direct experience of it, but you had a vicarious experience of it and were indirectly, but still very significantly impacted by that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's a vicarious connection that we often have to forms of stress and trauma that are not ours directly, but are very much personally experienced.
Yeah.
And if we don't account for that and address that from the perspective of well-being, our well-being overall can suffer. So this vicarious experience of life, it may not be my experience, my direct experience, but I still experience it vicariously. There is an indirect connection that I have with something, and there can be a directionality in terms of our well-being in that, not just individually, but collectively.
Yeah.
And there was an aspect of this that was occurring to you of that vicarious directionality in the direction of wellness or illness.
Yeah.
Can you
I
share
think,
a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. In that situation, again, I was looking at Facebook and all of the comments, and it was interesting to me because, you could see the two directions in quite a stark way. There were all of the people who there were lots of people who were commenting things like, oh, Fort Collins has gone downhill, you may as well move out. I mean, there were some, ridiculous comments that were very negative, that was their immediate stance, was to comment on something negative and like not hopeful. This is a disaster. Of course, this happened because of the state of the police, or blaming someone. It was there was the category of people who were commenting like that. But then there were also a category of people in the same Facebook thread of comments that were talking about how we're going to bolster together as community, and how they are praying for the families, and how there was this sense of togetherness in the face of adversity. And Tom, when you talk about direction, so what we're talking about here is that wellness cannot exist in isolation. Now, we can pretend it does, but that doesn't really matter. It doesn't, because of these situations, and there's all sorts of vicarious traumas out there. But when vicarious trauma happens, that is just like in the human body, when we talked about a sensation, we can either pathologize it, or we can see it as a homeostatic mechanism that brings healing. And I think that this is true on a community level, that there is, either the pathologizing is everything is gone to crap, it's all downhill, blah, 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 you may as well pack up and move. The understanding, the recognition of this is not a good thing. However, what hope can come out of this? What goodness, what healing can come out of it? And that lends us to a well-being that isn't just about us. And now suddenly this is extended homeostasis. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And we're talking from a neurobiology perspective about the difference between the different functions and the instrumentality of them in the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic, we sense or perceive a threat to well-being. It could be real, it could be made up, or it could be real, and then we make other stuff up about it. And the sympathetic is flight or fight. And there is an initial assessment. What is the significance of this? And it might be a pause or a freeze. And then there is the flight, which is stress and anxiety, and avoid, the sense to perceive threat, or fight, which is anger and depression. And that's an attempt to manage either with anger or with a hopeless effort that's powerless, and that's depressing.
Mm-hmm.
But when that has been triggered and it's a part of our protective survival, then it can shift into the parasympathetic and homeostasis and rest, relax, recover, and digest. And that is the direction of wellness.
Mm-hmm.
The direction of a lack of health and illness is to stay in that sympathetic flight or fight,
Mm-hmm.
and to reinforce that.
I think it's fascinating, Tom, because what we're really talking about is that we're saying that there's this collective brain almost. There's this collective nervous system in the cities that we live. There's this collective sense that together we can go into fight and flight. We can be in that sympathetic space, and also together we can move into a parasympathetic space where, it's, we do those things: rest, recover. What was the other one?
Rest, relax, recover, and
relax and digest what's happening, and make sure that we understand, okay, this has happened, but how do we move forward? And so I think, what we're talking about is like taking the picture of the anatomy of the human body, the brain, the nervous systems, what we know is actually happening within us. But there is a collective sense of that can happen. And if we don't understand that, it's going to be very difficult for us to pursue these the fundamentals of wellness, because we can't live separately from those things.
And we'll gather around us like-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
People who are stuck in the sympathetic often gather around them people who are stuck in the sympathetic.
Yeah.
And they reward and reinforce the flight or fight,
Mm-hmm.
the stress, the anxiety, the depression, the anger, and they gather people around them and they collectively experience that.
Mm-hmm.
Or there are those who collectively experience the and, not the but. So oftentimes, if you listen carefully, when someone has experienced something that's triggered the sympathetic nervous system, they may just stay there in that flight or fight and the inevitable downward spiral, or they may even say, yes, but.
Yeah.
But there's this. I like to go even further than that and use and.
Mm-hmm.
The parasympathetic as the homeostatic response to the dynamic disequilibrium and the portional impact of direct or indirect vicarious trauma, that it can be sympathetic, flight or fight, stress, anxiety, depression, anger, but there's rest, relax, recover, and digest, or and there is rest, relax, recover, and digest, and is different than but.
I love that. I actually think this is really important, because I think it's really important for us not to try and in some ways, of course, we are going to go into the sympathetic. There has been a threat to well-being. There is a threat to well-being. So that is a natural instinct in us to go into fight or flight. I think the question is, how long do we stay there? And can we be in the other place at the same time? Right. And I think that's like, instead of like it being these two options, suddenly that's a lot of options. Suddenly that's, yes, of course it's complex. Wellness isn't one thing or another thing. There's in some ways that for me, when you describe it like that, Tom, it's an invitation to be normal and human, and yet also move into the territory of wellness. And there's a journey and there's a process towards that.
Yep. So it's helpful to listen to ourselves and others as we hear and or but.
Yeah.
But is exceptional. It's an exception. It's trying to see an alternative and naturally gravitates toward the existing alternative and keeps it in mind.
Yeah.
Knowing that this is an and we in our neurobiology are designed and function that way.
Mm-hmm.
There is the sympathetic flight or fight, and there is the parasympathetic rest, relax, recover, digest. These vicarious traumas also have another factor that it's important to take into consideration, and that is timing. And
we finally arrived.
And timing and time. One of the things that we've talked about in other episode, but is particularly relevant to this, is because there is a time and a timing to all this that we experience these things in. Mm-hmm. You even alluded to it, that it was a time factor.
Yes.
In that,
well, I think it was, like I said to you earlier, it was really weird that I made that decision to go home. Like, what was that? And and also, Tom, there was another factor. Again, you know, obviously I'm like in Facebook world here, like as everyone else is, like, what is happening? And, you know, Fort Collins is still a relatively small community. And so I saw a friend of mine post something where she said, she said on Facebook in one of the comments, this was so crazy. I was just about to go to the mall, and as I was driving there, I had a last minute decision just to not bother and go home, which was exactly what happened to me. And I was like, what is that about? You know, like, it's crazy, but it's not that crazy. So talk to me about why that happened.
And not coincidental. There is a collective brain. Just as there's a collective brain, as Scott Turner would talk about, amongst all the termites in that termite mound, there is a collective brain that we all share in, that is a collective consciousness. And that may be a consciousness, it may be a conscious, a collective unconscious, or a collective subconscious. Mm-hmm. But we are many little lives, as Theodore de Bordeaux would put it, all existing together, all inhabiting the world together. Now, we, with the wisdom of our minds, may not see it that way or even want it to be that way, but it doesn't mean it isn't that way. And we collectively experience things. Whether you're in your home looking at Facebook, mm-hmm. or whether you're out on the drive, or there are people around, there are neighbors. Mm-hmm. Things are always happening. We have this illusion that we can live in isolation, and we don't, and we can't. And it's not even a healthy thing for that to be the case.
So you would say in that situation that there was at some level of subconscious mm-hmm. brain activity that was picking up on something that obviously my conscious brain wouldn't be aware of because I wouldn't know, but subconsciously there's, just like how animals can pick up on weather and also something like that, subconsciously my brain was connecting to the environment, and it wasn't safe for me to go there. Mm-mm. It's really interesting actually, because I just remember this story, but a few years ago, the house 2 doors down from us, their dog So in our neighborhood, all the dogs, there's like quite a lot of dogs. And at the time we had one too. And because we've got a green belt behind our house, and so people walk their dogs and stuff like that. But obviously the dogs are always in their own yard, so they never actually see each other. So there's not a dog park, right? So they know each other, but they never see each other. And the dog 2 doors down somehow got out, and a car hit the dog, and the dog died. And I heard it. I heard the car, and we went out, and like literally within 2 minutes, maybe less, all the dogs in our area started howling.
Yep.
Because there was a connection, and so
animals
I think
are smarter than we are.
Yeah, so I think I'm just describing that because actually it sounds in some ways it can sound crazy, like what Ruth's subconscious brain picked up on but actually when we see it in animals, why wouldn't that be in our subconscious selves, that there is a collective brain, there is a sense of interconnectedness. So I find that fascinating. I really find it. So talk more about timing then, and because we opened with some terrible jokes on timing.
You can edit them out if you want. This is why I don't usually lead off.
They were great, Tom, don't worry. But yeah, timing, there was that I think in that instance my subconscious brain was aware of Chronos timing. So let's talk about Chronos timing.
Yep. So when we experience something, we experience it in a moment. And in ancient Greek language, there are 2 different words for time. There is Chronos, which is what time is it? It's 4:30 or it's 4:45 or whatever it is. And that is Chronos. Time as we measure it. Time as you were experiencing it, leaving the gym, driving home, making that decision. That's something happens at a time, Chronos. But there's also this concept of Kairos, which is our connection to time and how time is experienced collectively. Kairos is the way that I like to describe it and define it, is the opportune moment. Everything necessary for something to occur is in place, so it can and may or may not. But Kairos is that opportune moment, because all the things necessary for something to occur are in place. And that occurs in Chronos at a particular time, but it's a different perspective on time. Think of it this way. I had the time of my life. Mm-hmm. When we use a phrase like that, we're alluding to Kairos.
Mm-hmm.
When? No, it's not a when. It was a what I experienced. And so when we experience wellness, that can be a Chronos thing, but it's also a Kairos thing. Mm. When we experience that in a Chronos, it may be occurring when I am in a trajectory of wellness in the Kairos. Or it may be when a person is in the trajectory of illness. And that was just the worst time for that to happen. See, but we don't use the particular terms for it. We use the Chronos. And I think if we are more intentional, and the more intentional we are about thinking in terms of Chronos and the opportune moment, then we leverage the time toward wellness.
Yeah, talk more about that, like in terms of how do we leverage time towards wellness in our, in the me-we state?
Because then it's not an isolated incident occurring and being experienced by me in an isolated situation.
Mm-hmm.
It gives context to it.
Mm.
It gives not just context to it, but it gives connection to it. That would have been one experience that would have been a different experience for you had we not had this conversation about it.
Mm-hmm.
The way you even think about it and perhaps even feel about it, because of this Kairos, of this conversation and this podcast conversation, and someone's going to hear this, your experience of that, I suspect, is different now.
Hmm.
Is it?
Yeah.
Because
so
yeah,
go on. No, talk more.
You're thinking differently about it.
Yeah.
It has a larger context. It's not just this one thing.
So Chronos, if we only see time as Chronos, it's the tendency within us is to see things very disconnected, would you say? But
Yep.
when we see Kairos, we see things more connected. So there's a context, there's and that provides an understanding even of the vicarious traumas, so to speak, of why that happened when and what time we are in. And understanding time in that way leads to our well-being.
Yep, or compromises it.
Okay.
And here's another extension of that, because Chronos is linear, one thing following another.
Mm-hmm.
This second followed by another second, and there are seconds to come. This minute, another minute, minutes to come. This hour, these hours, hours to come. Day, days, days to come. And what can happen is that we can get in a frame of mind where we have a negative anticipation and project out this linear trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
So would you say that example of me on Saturday in my car after the gym coming to the intersection was both Chronos and Kairos?
Yep.
So that's the thing, because actually Chronos would have led, if I only believed in Chronos, I should have gone to the mall.
Yes, because supper is going to come. I got to go get the food, etc. But there was a Kairos.
It was a Kairos moment
perspective
that turned the journey into a different direction.
Mm-hmm. And then Sunday following Saturday, and the linear Chronos and all the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
What's the trajectory of that? Or the Kairos. Thinking about it in a broader context.
Mm-hmm.
Kairos is the propitious moment. It's the opportune moment. Things are in place so that something can happen.
So yeah, I mean, we had planned this podcast conversation way before all this, but even so that's what you're saying, even the timing of this conversation and to be able to process what we were going to talk about through the lens of what happened on Saturday has led to further understanding for myself and yourself and possibly other listeners too. So interesting.
So it's time for wellness. Chronos, Kairos, and a vicarious experience of wellness.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm just pursuing wellness in isolation, it's not that that's not beneficial, but the beneficial impact is felt more strongly and more efficaciously if it's vicarious and mutual. I'm doing this with someone and with someone's. Yep.
That's so good. Thanks, Tom. Brilliant conversation there. I hope the listeners just have some really good things to wrestle with, because there's obviously lots of applications there in terms of our own wellness. And we'll get back for our next conversation soon. You've been listening to the Autonomic Homeostasis Activation Podcast. Join us next time as we continue in our conversations with Tom.
If you're interested in pursuing your own wellness journey, please check out our website, autonomichealing.org.
You can also reach out to Tom at innerworkings.org.